So I saw this Houdini Advanced Disintegration effect by Yasho, and I thought we could try it in Blender. You can see we have a rigid body system, a procedure fracturing system, pieces break off, and then it collapses completely. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to try and do it in a procedure fashion. So yeah, I have a skull here ready. Links in the description if you want to get any of these, and also if you want to watch this video. Yeah, let's first set up a particle system, disintegrate this, add a new particle system. If I hit play, you can see the particles are just falling. If I use an explode, you can see the meshes are turned into the particles, and I can go to the particle system and under render, change the render as to object and leave the instance empty so that I only see the faces. I'm also going to go under velocity, make sure this is set to 0, go under field weights, turn the gravity all the way down, switch on the size and cut edges to add some random cuts. So if I have size on, I can go to the particle system. Make sure that you are viewing this at frame 1, otherwise if you are frame 0 you won't see any effect. Turn on size, and when you go to the particle system and play with this size, you can see that these chunks are shrinking. Make sure the end frame is the same as the start frame. Control the size of these here as long as I have this size option on. If you don't want to see any of the gaps, make sure the scale is set to 1 and you won't see any of that. Have it like that so that you can see the disintegration happening. Now if I add a decimate modifier above the particle system and go to the particle system and make sure that the source is use modifiers, I can easily come here and adjust my shapes a bit. You can also go to the particle system and set these to maybe 100 so we don't have too many chunks. Add a solidify modifier. I don't want any intersecting issues like that, so I want to keep it very small. Okay, so after we're done with this, we can use Ctrl A to apply visuals to mesh. Now go into edit mode and hit P, loose parts, so that we have our chunks like this. Select all of these, right click, set origin to geometry so that the origin is recalculated to its center. Select everything, go to object, rigid body, add active. If I hit play, I need to go to the first frame. I can see everything just shoots out. Now you can go under object, rigid body, connect, and have these connected into one piece. But one thing you will notice, if I add a plane and give this object rigid body passive and hit play, you can see it doesn't hold as you expect. There is a lot of gaps and it just doesn't work very fine. For this to hold correctly, these constraints have to be at the center of their connection. So for example, if you want the two pieces to be glued together without any gaps, you have to make sure that when you connect, so if I go under object, rigid body, connect, this constraint is close, it's at the center. That's why you see that these two pieces are now glued. There isn't a big gap between them. So this constraint has to be in the center of the two pieces for that to happen. But the connect add-on doesn't do that. If I try that again, you can see it adds a lot of gaps. These are not at the center of the connected pieces. That's why you see we get this weird artifact. So I knew I had to use some Python to do that. But I didn't want to figure out the code necessary to handle that. So I relied on ChatGPT. And so we went back and forth and brainstorming how we could do that. So I asked it to write some code. I tested it. It got some errors. I went back and we talked about it. And my boy was very, very hopeful. You can see we went back and forth for a very, very long time until we came out with something that I think worked. So I've been working on this add-on with my boy ChatGPT to get this to work. So I basically, with the help of ChatGPT, I turned all the steps that you saw me do into an add-on called Quick Destroy. So let's go back to our original skull and just redo this, but in a much faster way using the add-on I created using ChatGPT. So yeah, the first thing was to fracture this. I'll just do a fracture option, and you can see I already have the fracturing done. So I can select this and come here and reduce these particles. Let's use 100, and I think that's good enough. You can again scale this down to see the different shapes you have, but if you put this value to 1, you won't see the cracks at all. Yeah, this is what AI should be used for, just creating tools to make your life easier. And if you hit separate, it will just create a copy of this skull. Basically, this is where we left off without the add-on, and we had this set as a rigid body, and I added some buttons to do that as well. Instead of just going up here, I can access all of that here. So hit play, we get that, and I'm going to add a plane. Hit play, all chunks fall down like that. And let's try out the new connection tool. So I'm going to make a copy here, and for this I'm going to use the original connect. You can see if I play back, you see how things fall apart. There is a lot of gaps there. And now if I select this, I have a new make connection option here that I can select, and I just make connections. Okay, so this has done its calculation, and you can see even the pieces themselves make up the shape of the skull. I can see that from the side as well here. One thing I couldn't figure out is the shape always comes up a bit offset and not in the exact position. So you can usually just scale them up and move it a bit until the pieces line up correctly, and I have to do this from the side as well. If we hit play, you can see now we get a better connection with less gaps between each piece. Now you can see this holds up much better than this done using with the connect add-on. So, and if you want to select just the connections, you can just select everything and use the select connections, and you have those selected. Add something like an empty, scale it down, and I select the chunks. So Shift G, I'll select by collection, and then parent this to this using Ctrl P. I can move this around fairly easily and even rotate it the way I want. We don't need this anymore, so I'm just going to select that, remove that. Yeah, so I can easily change the initial position just like that, and everything is good. Okay, so now let's try and fracture it in the same way as this. These constraints here are what controls how this is fractured. These constraints, if you enable breakable, you can break them and admit the break threshold. So I'll just hold on Alt and then click on breakable so that they are breakable. If we play back, they fall, but they're not breaking because the threshold is too high. If I put this at something like, let's say 0.1, hit play, now you can see everything just falls apart. We don't want it to just shatter like that. We want it to be more like this. So a small piece breaks off and then another one breaks off. Actually, I think in my original render, it shows that even better. So the fracturing is not instant. You can see pieces break off and then the rest collapse. First bring back the threshold. Let's set it to 50. Hit play. Everything is intact. So let's say we want this half here to break fast, but then this doesn't. I only want to have these connections selected, so I'll just select that, and I want again to animate. So on the first bounce, so I'll animate this threshold. So I'll just keyframe that, and then go to frame like 20 and turn this to 0. So that everything breaks. But you notice that it's only going to work for one piece. It's not applied to the rest of the pieces because we have just only keyframed the active constraint. So I'm just going to use Ctrl L to link the animation to all the other selected connections. So now it should, yeah, fracture just like that. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, and then we can select the rest. You can select, let me first hide this. Yeah, we can select the rest. I'm just going to select those constraints and the rest. But before we do that, so we have two sets of animation. We have this chunk and then this piece that falls next. And they all have linked animations. All these constraints are sharing the same animation. If you change one, all of them are going to change. So what I'm going to do is just select all of them, Shift G, and just go under Object, Relations, Make Single User, Object Animation. So in case we select any of these and change them, we don't change the others. So let's go there. Make sure that they break. So I want to animate the breakable here. We start at that threshold, and then they all collapse by changing the threshold back to 0. Again, Ctrl L, link animation, so that the selected ones have the same animation. So let's play back. That piece breaks, the jaw breaks, and then the rest breaks. That's, yeah, basically the same disintegration we have there. You can see it's collapsing onto itself. Okay, so we are halfway done because we need to add a secondary particle system for the full disintegration. So yeah, so when working here, make sure that all your chunks, for example these chunks, are all in a single collection, and the quick destroy add-on will do that for you automatically. And make sure also these constraints are in their own collection, and again the quick destroy add-on will do that for you. Yeah, so let's add the secondary particles for this. First thing I'm going to do is go to the rigid body setting and make sure that I cache my simulation. So I'll bake the simulation so that nothing changes as we are working with geometry nodes to add the secondary particles. To add the secondary particles, I can actually just hide this. I need to hide this first. Add a plane. This is going to hold our geometry nodes, and the geometry nodes is just 2 nodes. I just import in this. If I look at that, we only need to realize these instances. That way we can use a particle system onto this. So yeah, just set up a plane, add a realized instance, bring in the collection and realize the instance, and you should be good to go. So now we can add a particle system. To this. If the particles are coming from the center, just go to the source and make sure you use modifiers. Again, now you can see what we have. I'm going to select this plane, give it a collision option so that the particles don't go through it. Just like that, they can bounce off. I'm going to come here to the particle system and make sure the end frame, these particles, I want the particles to start emitting around here, frame 85. And what we want to render object, but add nothing in the instance, and go to the modifiers and again add a explode modifier, and we can now hit play, see where we are at. And I can see now the particles disintegrate. I'm going to remove the gravity from the particles. Yeah, then another thing we could add is some turbulence. Let's say 5, a size of 2, hit play. Yeah, you can see what we have. Then we can come here and also add some random rotation. Just randomize everything, make sure it's dynamic, and use a velocity of an angular velocity of 2. And maybe angular velocity of, let's say, 10. Yeah, they're dying too early, so let's do 250, and the end frame can be 100, so that we have a lot of particles at once. So yeah, something like that. Now the rest, you can add a smoke effect. We're just adding a domain and selecting the particle system, giving it a fluid system, flow, and the type smoke and inflow, and should be able to get some dust particles like that. Everything else is just lighting, setting up the camera, and that's it. So this is our final results. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.